Death and Taxes by Samey90. Ever since Trixie officially moved into her castle, Twilight learned to ignore her noisy presence. Most of the time, ignoring the magician's antics was the only way to maintain sanity. This time, however, Twilight couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. As she passed a half-closed door, she saw Starlight and Trixie carrying some rather large object. She stopped, turned back, and took another look, which only confirmed her worst fears.
"What in Tartarus are you two doing this time?"
Twilight asked, bursting into the room.
"Trixie did nothing wrong,"
Trixie replied, trying in vain to hide behind a purple coffin adorned with Twilight's cutie mark.
"Trixie is legally unable to do anything right or wrong."
Twilight furrowed her brows and turned to Starlight.
"What's going on? Did you dig this coffin up, or are you going to dispose of a mistake?" "Twilight, calm down. Why would we dig up a coffin?"
Starlight asked.
"I would be calmer if just last month you two hadn't tried to buy a vial of a hanged pony's, genetic material on the black market just to see if Knetzut's the incubus is really as handsome as the old grimoire said."
Twilight replied.
"It was for science,"
Trixie said.
"You like science, don't you, Twilight?" "Yes, but I still don't know what part of Knetzut's the incubus usually bears appearance of a handsome stallion. His true form exists in 11 dimensions, and any attempt at comprehending it ends in a spontaneous cranial conflagration. Needed clarification."
Twilight rolled her eyes.
"This seems like a brand new coffin, so at least you didn't desecrate a grave this time. Did you kill some pony?"
Trixie shook her head.
"Nah, then we wouldn't bother with a coffin." "Trixie, you're not helping,"
Starlight muttered.
"Okay,"
Twilight said.
"Is this some new fetish thing? Because if you two are going to have sex in it, I'm leaving. Although Sunburst would probably be into it.
Twilight tapped her chin, frowning in thought. Starlight and Trixie looked at each other and chuckled.
"It's a legitimate business,"
Starlight said.
"We have about 100 coffins stacked in the palace right now."
Twilight frowned.
"While I appreciate that you decided to do something useful for once, can you not do it in my palace? Also, why does this Celestia damn coffin have my cutie mark on it?" "It's official merchandise,"
Trixie replied.
"Trixie can't be a fan now? I have merchandise?
Twilight rolled her eyes.
I'll need to talk to my lawyer." "Speaking of lawyers,"
Trixie said.
"do you remember Count Vindigogosti? You mean that Romanian lawyer who proved that since he's a vampony, he's technically dead and doesn't have to pay taxes?"
Twilight asked.
"Exactly."
Trixie patted the lid of the coffin.
"So now, the great and formerly biological Trixie is officially dead. And so, she doesn't have to pay taxes anymore."
Twilight's jaw dropped.
"The what now? Did you turn yourself into a vampire just to avoid paying taxes?" "Nah. The great and alternatively living Trixie is smarter than that." "She identifies as an alternatively alive being."
Trixie smirked.
"More specifically, a Striziga,"
Starlight said. Trixie smiled sheepishly.
"Yeah, Trixie can never pronounce that right."
Twilight hit her forehead with her hoof.
"The tax office left you alone because you told them you're an undead demon whose name you can't even pronounce right?"
Trixie clicked her tongue.
"We don't use the U word. It was coined by our biological oppressors. Trixie prefers the term formerly biological. Also, Trixie may actually be a Striziga.
Starlight muttered.
That's what Trixie said!
Trixie lifted her hoof.
See? Trixie has no armpit hair. Yes, but they also have 2 hearts, 2 souls, and 2 sets of teeth,
Twilight said.
You can't prove Trixie doesn't have them.
Trixie smiled.
The second set of teeth is barely visible. Any semi-competent dentist can,
Twilight replied.
It doesn't matter. Trixie already feels dead inside.
Trixie said.
Why are you so mean to Trixie? Are you necrophobic?
Twilight groaned.
Starlight, tell me you at least didn't start saying that you're a werepony or something just to avoid paying taxes. Oh, of course not,
Starlight replied.
I just registered my old cult. And as it turns out that as a religious leader, I'm exempt from taxes, even if the current number of my followers is 0.
Twilight blinked.
But you don't believe in any of that anymore, right?
Starlight shrugged.
What religious leader does? Right.
Twilight sighed.
I just remembered. I have to write a letter to Princess Celestia. A very long letter.
She turned back and left the room quickly. Starlight looked at Trixie and smiled.
Want to do it in a coffin?
Trixie stretched her hooves in a hot tub and levitated a martini. It was an early morning, but she decided she deserved it. Sleeping in the coffin was more uncomfortable than she previously thought, and she needed a hot tub and a massage to get into shape for the morning. Suddenly, she heard the sound of breaking glass. She turned towards the source of the sound just in time to almost get knocked out with a male pony's bag, which bounced off of her head and landed right next to her coffin. The male pony in question was either less or more lucky, depending on perspective. She landed right in Trixie's hot tub, splashing water around.
What in Tartarus?
Trixie muttered.
I'd like to ask the same question,
the male pony said, emerging from the water.
When will you all learn to leave the windows open? Sorry, Derpy,
Trixie muttered.
Any new coffin orders? Only 3.
Derpy replied, shaking the water off of her coat and grabbing her bag.
I have the newspapers, though. The Voice of Ponyville, Canterlot Times, Magician's Own, Play Clown, and All Hazira. Good,
Trixie said.
The great and powerful Trixie needs her Saddle Arabia Stock Exchange updates. I earned a lot of money on frozen concentrated orange juice,
Derpy said, squeezing the water out of her mane.
Don't tell, Applejack. Trixie heard tulip bulbs are all the rage,
Trixie said.
Rosalux says it's gonna crash. Really? Why?
Trixie asked.
Tulips are tasty, but toxic.
Derpy picked up her bag and took off.
Gotta go!
Trixie watched Derpy fly through the smashed window and picked up the Voice of Ponyville. Suddenly, she frowned and levitated the newspaper closer, reading the article. The door opened and Starlight walked in.
Good news, Trix, she said. Applejack bought a coffin for Granny Smith. Oh, she finally died?
Trixie asked, absent-mindedly, still focused on the newspaper.
Nah, she started to identify as a zombie,
Starlight replied.
She claims Sweet Apple Acres are always being buggered by the tax office, so now it's her time to do the buggering. Not to mention that she needs cash because someone screwed her over on Frozen. She may want to reconsider.
Trixie levitated the newspaper to Starlight. Starlight looked at the article.
Huh. So, according to this new bill, since the undead ponies technically died, they can't own anything? Yep,
Trixie replied.
I sense Twilight's hoof in this.
Starlight smirked.
So, technically, I've inherited your wagon and a box of explosives.
Trixie frowned.
You'll to pry Trixie's wagon out of her cold, dead hooves. I mean, according to the law, you're a wannabe vampire with 2 hearts, 2 souls, 2 sets of teeth, no armpit hair, and no vowels in the name, Starlight said. You're legally dead. Also, I think Lusterdon inherited your tulip bulbs.
Trixie raised her eyebrows.
Who the hell is Lusterdon? Okay, I mean, just because the lawyer said that if we admit who her parents are, we'll all be sent to Tartarus with no parole, doesn't mean you have to pretend you don't know her, Starlight said. She screams when she's hungry, and she smells funny. Sounds familiar. Shut up! Trixie exclaimed. Trixie now has to come back to life. And admit fraud? Starlight asked. To think about it, you could be reborn as a demigod, but I think they pay extra taxes. On the other half, getting citizenship of the Hayman Islands would require being alive.
Before Trixie could reply, Twilight galloped into the room.
You!
Trixie exclaimed, grabbing her.
You got Trixie into this clusterfuck! I know! Twilight exclaimed. But I'll help you out. Just stop trying to strangle me! What?
Trixie asked.
Turns out, the reform of the inheritance law has its, opponents, Twilight said. Very powerful opponents. The actual undead? Starlight asked.
Trixie shuddered.
Lawyers? Both.
Twilight pointed at the vapor of smoke rising in front of them, which slowly solidified into a pale vampony wearing a black robe with holes for his bat wings. He pulled a cart with a black, silver-adorned coffin. When he finished materializing, the coffin opened, revealing some horrible pony-like creature with gray, bare skin, ruffled red mane, and rather large teeth. When the creature saw Starlight, Trixie, and Twilight, it roared, revealing a second, much smaller set of teeth behind its enormous fangs. Welcome, princess. My name is Count Vinde Gogossi, the vampony said, bowing. Lawyer, aristocrat, and the activist campaigning for the rights of the alternatively alive creatures. He pointed at the unholy being in the coffin. This is my client, Orpaina. She's a Sturziga. We believe you're responsible for this whole balagan.
Hey, it's your compatriot,
Twilight whispered to Trixie.
Maybe you can tell her not to eat us? It wouldn't come to this if you didn't try to make Trixie pay taxes, Trixie muttered. Deal with it!
Again with the stereotypes. Vinde Gogossi rolled his eyes. My client hasn't eaten any pony in centuries. She's a wealthy landowner who will not be forced to give her ancient castle to her heirs. He opened a file. Some particularly vile mortal called Spoiled Rich.